Well, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk about a project that's really been at work for the last couple of years or so. We call it the PNW. I'm going to teach the world what PNW stands for. I've even found people that lived here their whole life that they don't know what it stands for when I ask them. The PNW Science and Wonder Center. Basically give you a little bit of background, what's driving it, the opportunity that the Lord has opened up, and give you a status on where we are and where we hope to go. You'll see the subtitle there is a space-themed destination for exploration and discovery. This is envisioned to be a national level destination as well as a significant regional resource for ongoing use for the local population. There's three what I call foundational perspectives that I'd like to, before I get into the details of the center, talk about. These are the three foundational perspectives that make this thing possible. First is the biblical perspective, and I'm going to summarize it. I don't have time to go through the whole lesson on it. We'll do that at another time. But there's a biblical basis for this. I'm also going to give you a personal perspective. Most of you know my background. It opens and has opened many doors of opportunity to bring the gospel message to the world. And it's uniquely tied to science, technology, engineering. I would include arts and mathematics, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I also want to point out, again, I don't have time to go through the whole detail, but there's a historic context upon which this built as well. First, the biblical perspective, and I'm going to summarize this, and by the way, this all comes from the first chapter of the Bible, Genesis 1. We have presuppositions. First, God has intelligently provisioned and ordered his creation in vast and amazing ways, largely yet undiscovered and untapped. That's why scientific endeavor continues. There's still things to be discovered, still things to be utilized. God governs the universe comprehensively with a perfect coherence. It's work of coherence. And we know, if we know the Bible, we know right from Colossians 1 and Hebrews 1 that Christ upholds the universe by the word of his power. It's a continuous power of God. There it is. And we are continually and utterly dependent upon our Creator. And then the other aspect is we are unique. Pastor Alexei this morning pointed this out. We bear the image of the Creator, and with that image we have a remarkable ability to search out, develop, and utilize that ordered provision that he put in his work of creation. The dominion mandate, as it's sometimes called, includes the work of science and technology to subdue that provision and grow in fruitfulness. And what I'm talking about is that verse. It says, be fruitful and multiply and subdue and have dominion. Scientific endeavor is included in that with a biblical, looking at it, understanding it through a biblical lens. Christian faith and a biblical worldview thereby provide both the intellectual presuppositions and the moral sanction to do that work. That's what drives it if you understand it biblically. And that work is motivated for the glory of God as well as the good of mankind. To delight in his works. Great are the works of the Lord, studied by all who delight in them. Psalm 111, verse 2, which is really a theme verse for this effort. And at one time in history was known as the Scientist Psalm. There you see my other home. And I use that as an illustration again for the biblical perspective. The universe is logical, it's rational, it's intelligible, it's discoverable, it's thereby useful. And oh, by the way, it's inherently beautiful and wondrous. And when we use words like that, it demands God as the explanation for wonder and beauty and such words that we use to characterize what we see. There's two primary biblical themes that this whole thing is built on. God's provisioning, as I talked about, and mankind's utilization. Again, the dominion mandate and our ability to do so. There's a vast and incredible, precisely ordered provision out there to be explored, discovered, developed, and utilized. We call them laws of nature. It requires a lawgiver. So it points to God, the rational lawgiver and provider. He is the provider that gives permission. And again, we've had, bearing the image of God, we've been given an amazing curiosity to search it out, an inclination to do so, and the ability to do so. And we've seen it throughout history. And that is related to bearing the image and answering the call of the cultural mandate. So that's the biblical foundation, if you will. The personal foundation or background, I've already alluded to. Obviously, most of you know my career was dedicated to the space station, building it for over a period of a couple decades, which is an amazing accomplishment of humanity, especially when you consider God's provisioning to enable it and mankind's ability, bearing the image of the Creator, to actually dream of it and then accomplish it. And of course, it's still flying. And another personal aspect I'll share with you is I've spent a lot of time in Russia, and they're a key partner with that. So that's the personal background. And obviously, everybody loves space, it seems to me anyway. And it opens doors, as I've talked about, in ways I never dreamed of. And oh, by the way, from a personal perspective, this whole endeavor is not me driving it. It's a stewardship. It's a stewardship of what the Lord has given me in experience over my lifetime. The highlight of the entire experience is right there. I call it the ultimate skydive. But in that experience, I get this question a lot. How can you be a believer and work at NASA? Or how can you work in the field of science and be a Christian? That question, as written here, betrays the perception of conflict between science and the Bible. And how many have heard of the conflict between science and the Bible? You know it's out there. If I said how many believe it would be true, many of those hands would go down. That leads to the historical perspective, which is probably most significant in the context of culture. There's two competing storylines in history, and believe me, I've spent years and years and years researching the history, and I understand both storylines very well. There's something I call just briefly the conflict thesis, and I list a bunch of names there, and I'm not going to go through them for lack of time tonight. But those names and others through the 1700s, 1800s, into the 1900s propagated the myth of conflict throughout history between science and religion, specifically science and the Christian faith. And you see the words there, the claim that Christianity is a repressive and regressive force holding back the progressive force of science. That's what we hear. I call it the most successful, in a negative way, propaganda campaign in modern history. There's another string of, or storyline of history, and I call it the biblical reality, what we know as the age of science, or sometimes referred to, and I don't like to use this term, scientific revolution that occurred in the 1800s, flourished specifically because many of those scientists had a biblical worldview. They had the presuppositions I talked about before, that God had uniquely provisioned his creation for our good and his glory, and given us the ability to search it out and to develop and utilize that provision. They believed in a rational creator. They believed in a precisely ordered universe that was predictable, that was discoverable, all of those things that I talked about earlier. That's not in the textbooks. But we read about names like this, Johann Kepler, who mathematically discovered very precisely the orbit of Mars. That's what he's most known for. Boyle, if you're a scuba diver, you've studied Boyle's law. Isaac Newton, we've heard of Newton's laws of motion. Whether we know it or not, we use them in everything we do every day. Euler, the most famous sought-after mathematician in Europe during his time. Faraday and Maxwell, who opened the door to everything we take for granted today in the category of electromagnetic work. Louis Pasteur, you have milk in your refrigerator, it's likely pasteurized, named after Louis Pasteur. Lord Kelvin in thermodynamics. Those are just a few examples, and you can see it spread out from the 1600s into the early 1900s. They were all believers, and they were driven by their theological understanding, their biblical worldview, and their scientific endeavor. And I've got quote after quote after quote that give testimony to that. And here's just one. Johann Kepler. The chief aim of all investigations of the external world should be to discover the rational order and harmony which has been imposed on it by God and which he revealed to us in the language of mathematics. Mathematics is, I could give another lecture on that. It is an amazing field. It's not invented, it's discovered. The mathematical order that we see is not an invention of man. It's discovered. It's a character of God's provisioning that makes it useful in so many different ways. Now, how did the conflict come to be? Well, I'm not going to tell the history, but I'm going to give you a couple of quotes. These are quotes from atheists, and they're really revealing, because what they basically admit is they don't believe in what they're propagating. Their sole purpose is to get the Christian worldview out of the public square. And this is here is a quote from 1906. Ernest Haeckel was a German atheist that wanted to get the authority of the clergy and the church out of the influence, the cultural influence in Europe. 1906, our science of evolution won its greatest triumph when at the beginning of the 20th century, its powerful opponents, the churches, became reconciled to it and endeavored to bring their dogmas into line with it. I've become convinced that the leadership of the church at this time, late 1800s, early 1900s, was ill-equipped to challenge this rising authority of science. And they couldn't meet it. They couldn't debate it. They couldn't, and so they acquiesced. So hence we get the evolution and the millions and billions of years. Here's one more quote just to illustrate the point. This guy, Michael Ruse, this is more recent, years 2000. He's a former Christian. He admits this. Now he's an atheist. He says, evolution is promoted as more than mere science. It's propagated as an ideology, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity with meaning and morality. I'm an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian. Evolution is a religion, true in the beginning. It's true of evolution still today. Evolution, atheism, and humanism offer no answers, only protest against Christianity. So it's a disclosure of what the real agenda is and has been in this history of conflict. You know, by the way, just do a search on the internet of the conflict thesis. And even on Wikipedia, they have a fairly good article that summarizes the history of two guys, particularly guys by the name of Draper and White. Draper and White, very interesting history. It was fabricated, though. That's why I call it the most successful example of propaganda in modern history. So our presupposition going into this vision of this science center is right here. The various endeavors in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, hence STEAM. You've heard the acronym STEM. I've added A to it. I'm not the only one, but we add arts to it, so it's STEAM. Are elements of human activity in the exercise and fulfillment of the dominion mandate given in Genesis 1:28. Where God blessed those who were created in his image and charged them to fruitfulness in subduing his richly provisioned creation. So our mission could be stated right there on the bottom of the screen, to redeem that worldview for the glory of God. So here it is, the center as envisioned. It's got a strategic location. If you look at the national map, you have, and this was illustrated to me about a year and a half ago, and it actually elevated my thinking a little bit, and it was Ken Ham. I was meeting with him, sharing his vision with him, getting his feedback, and he said, usually people come in, they promote something like this, and I say, it's a bad idea, because, and this is the reason why. And he paused, and he said, but yours is a good idea, and this is why. He said, your location is strategic. You got the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., Creation Museum, Ark Encounter in Kentucky. There's an immersion experience in Branson, Missouri. There's nothing out west comparable to those destinations. I thought, oh, you just upped the scale of what we're thinking of here. And then he said the theme, and I agree with this, the theme of STEAM complements those other themes. The Museum of the Bible is the theme of the history of the Bible. In Kentucky, it's creation and the flood. In Branson, Missouri, it's stories of the Bible. There's nothing, as far as I know, there's nothing in the world that focuses on STEAM through a biblical worldview. So the purpose is strategic as well. And then he pointed at me and he said, and you personalize it. So again, as I said earlier, I consider this a stewardship of what the Lord has given me in experience. So, but it matters. It matters strategically for this. I have this role, I guess you say, this responsibility to serve in that way. I've added a fourth pillar, if you will. That's the cultural timing. When we think about what we've gone through the last few years, starting with COVID and the whole vaccination thing and the challenge of the authority of science, and scientist says this, science says that, the consensus of scientists is this, and then we found out that a lot of that was just lies. You know, it put a nick in the armor of the authority of science in the public mind. So now there's a renewed, this is not the first time in history, by the way, but there's a kind of a renewed searching of meaning, of answers, of truth out there. So the cultural timing of this, I think, is strategic as well. So what have we done? Well, we envision this to be, right now, baseline 125,000 square foot facility. So think of all the elements of a museum, plus classroom elements, laboratory elements, maybe technology incubation activities. Think of an auditorium where conferences can be held, or concerts or plays or other activities. Think a grand science fair. Think robotics, regional robotics competition. Food service, gift shop, bookstore, outdoor spaces. That's what's envisioned right now. As I alluded to earlier, a premier national destination and regional resource for education, for exploration, for all the elements of discovery and the topics of STEAM. Easy access on the I-5 corridor in the greater Vancouver, Portland area, a strategic location. Restricted governance to retain the mission focus and prevent mission drift. What do I mean by that? Well, simply stating, we will not accept any government funding. We will not accept funding that has stipulations that would take us off the narrow path. So that the governance of this thing will preserve its mission on that straight line for generations to come. So a future board or future executive leadership can't take it off the rails and compromise it. So that's a key part of the development. The core team is forming. Answers in Genesis in Kentucky have been very helpful with lots of resources. We have an NDA with them. We've been working with them for, about a year and a half now. There's an architectural firm based in Chicago, Rice Point Architecture. They've been working with us for 6 months pro bono, and now we're in land studies, so they're leading that effort. They're great folks. They're Christians. Their core business are churches and Christian schools, but they do lots of other things too. So they're leading the effort now to in the early design phases and the land studies. PLS Engineering here in Vancouver is the civil engineering company subcontracted under Rice Point. Archive Studios is a company in Kentucky. One of the owners of this company is the exhibit, what's his title? He leads the organization that develops and builds exhibits for the Creation Museum in Kentucky. And I was there in April. I gave a presentation on this, and it was a conference that had the theme of all the creatives, all the creative work that happens in the Christian world on the level of like Disney level or Hollywood level production, technology and all the high-end stuff. All the creatives were there. There were, 400 or 500 people there. After my presentation, I got swarmed. And the lead architect was there with me, and he was identified. He got swarmed. We had all these creatives. Hey, we want to come on board. We want to become part of this. So Archive Studios is owned by their lead exhibit developer. He's come to me, and he's joined the team pro bono. He says, I just want to bless you guys. He's got contacts all over the country for the resources necessary to develop what goes on the inside of this facility at a very high level of excellence. Robertson & Olson, you might be familiar with them. They're a big construction company, or GC, in the Vancouver area. Their office is in Camas. They did a major part of the waterfront. And I've had great conversations with them, with the president. By the way, all these folks really support and believe in the Christian emphasis of this, to include Matt at Robertson & Olson. Fastech Solutions is a company here that does IT services for corporations across the country. They have built our IT system. Alpha Tech is in-house here. They're going to help us with the development of all the IT in the building, particularly with the exhibits. And the focus group is helping. They're based in Florida. They're helping with the capital campaign, which we're just now getting up and running. Obviously, this is going to take a lot of capital. This is the biggest challenge right now. We established a 501c3 last summer, 1st of July, set up the corporation. We have a board of directors of 3. Patrice Sagi, sitting right here, is on my board. He and I are also working together in another business. So he brings a lot to the table. Rodney Sarkalu, who lives in South Florida, is a developer. He brings that expertise and background to the table. We have a website active. We've set up the IT space to get started. We've secured the option to purchase 70 acres in the I-5 corridor. I'm working on an additional 10 acres. There's some negotiation going on there. We can do it with the 70 that we have, but we're trying to procure even more adjacent acreage to optimize the setting. We've got some early design work in progress. And as I said, the capital raise is in work. Here's just a depiction. I don't think I have a pointer here, but just right of center and up a little bit is the main building. You got the parking lot there. You got a pond and up and to the left of there. So walking areas. There's envisioned to be outbuildings like a laboratory. I don't want to have a wet laboratory in the main building because it adds too much requirement, environmental controls and whatnot. So that would be separate. Also envision a retail, for-profit business section that complements the function of the core, that also is a revenue stream to support the core. So there's lots of elements there. I won't talk anymore about that. Here's a depiction of the front entrance. The roof line there is inspired by the Wright Flyer, the Wright brothers airplane. So that's the inspiration of the roof. There's a whole lot in here. I don't have time to go into it. I will say that here's first floor in the atrium. One of the key centerpieces, if you will be a Foucault pendulum, which I was greatly impacted by when I was about 12 years old. And my dad took us all to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. And it's a big pendulum. And this one's, we're shooting for 75 feet high, hung on a steel cable, a big ball, steel ball, a couple 100 pounds, and it swings back and forth in about a 5-second period. And in that, you can illustrate the physics of the rotation of the Earth. We can prove it's not flat. But it so inspired me as a 12-year-old that I went back and I spent time trying to theorize how it worked. because it did keep time. If you're off the equator, it'll keep time. If you're on the North Pole, it'll go around every 24 hours. If you're in between, it'll something longer as a function of the latitude. And I wrote up this theory and how it worked, and I took it to my science teacher, and I explained it to him, and he disagreed with me. He said, no, it doesn't work that way. This is how it works. And years ago, after my parents passed away, my brother was going through the homestead, and he came across some notes that I had made with that whole story. And it turned out I was right. My science teacher was wrong. So we're going to have a Foucault pendulum in the foyer of this thing. And then all the major exhibits in fields of science, whether it's geology, chemistry, physics, electromagnetics, space flight, astronomy. It'll have all of those things and all the elements of the arts that are associated with it as well. It's a big push, big lift for capital. So here's 4 years. If we were able to raise the capital, we could have this thing open by 2030, easily. My lead architect says the fall of 2029, but he calls that an aggressive schedule. My guess is a fair schedule would be, in fact, I still have up here Q3 of 29 in the upper right-hand corner. I'm hoping by the spring of 30. We need just a few $1 million this year, but we need a big lift this year to get the $18 million that you see in the yellow 2027, February 1st, to procure the land. And the goal is to pay off the land. My theory is you got to have the land paid off. You can't go vertical with a nonprofit venture like this with donors if you're in debt for the land. And then you see in 2028 a $60 million figure for the primary construction, and then an additional almost 60 in 2029 to complete it. And I won't go into a lot of the details in the interest of time, but that's the plan for that. So this year, I won't go into all this in great detail, but you'll see it's broken out that what the money is required for between now and February. The bulk of it is the land. Of course, if we have more funding, capital funding, then we continue with the design, the curriculum development, all of the stuff on the inside, getting that staffing up, accelerating the fundraising efforts, the governance, the systems, the corporate systems, and all of that. That's the breakout of this year, or I'll say the next 9-10 months. So capital raise is a big need. Project manager for site development. Right now the lead architect is serving that role, but eventually we'll get somebody hired to run this thing continually. Expanding the board of directors, we're going from 3 to 5. In fact, just finished that work 2 days ago. So this week we'll go to a board of 5. Setting up the books and administrative support, that'll come here now in the near future. Advisory council, I'm trying to build an advisory council that brings a lot of expertise across the spectrum of interest to keep us honest and help us in the development. Governance documents I talked about. Building the systems, there's lots of systems to make an endeavor like this work. So how can you help? Well, the first one is please commit this effort to prayer. This will only happen if the Lord enables it. So this is His doing. I'm only stewarding the opening of the doors before me that He opens up. Pray for wisdom and discernment in the stewardship of that process, that the Lord provide the resources to do this, and that He help us through that wisdom and discernment to build the right team to make this thing successful. If you have certain expertise that you think might make a contribution to this, let it be known. There's a place on the website where you can communicate that, or you can talk to me, although don't count on me remembering because I get these conversations continually and I try to keep up on them all, but make your expertise known. Join the effort when the time is right. Not everything is needed today, but eventually there will be things needed in the future. You can sign up for a mailing list on the website and get future updates. And if you have a potential contribution in any way, make it known, again, on the website. And if God has blessed you with the means, support this thing financially. Again, that's the limiting factor right now, and that will be the pacing item, I predict, for the development of this thing. That's it. I do want you to take note of this. This is a survey. I'm collecting data, and of course, data is always good. If we can document the support from the general public, specifically in this area, that'll help support our efforts, especially when we're presenting this to donors.